by the military-industrial complex.
It could be seen to move violently forward, violently forward, violently forward.
I'm just a patsy.
Let's win there.
I said this once or twice, but it bears repeating. If you like your current insurance, you will keep your current insurance.
You think about the Army and the Navy and the missions they run to protect the world, they run on SAC.
Well, you have done a really spectacular job. I guess pretty much everybody at this table is your customer, so that's not so bad.
Exactly.
I want to congratulate
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you.
And we're back. How you doing, George?
In more ways than one, Peter. Yes, we are back. So back on the horse.
You look like you're in front of a log cabin there, George.
I am. In remote sticks. I've decided we're trying to provide an alternative for people who going to Burning Man. You know Burning Man.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy who's been my troll for 8 years runs burningman.com, the guy named Steve Outram, multimillionaire. Why he finds it so fascinating. But I thought, well, let's offer Steve an alternative. Let's do Learning Man. And it's in Nevada. So I'm like, okay, I just need to keep 1 foot in Nevada, right, to offer an alternative. And, so I've been exploring with 1 foot in Nevada. And I don't want to do a Burning Man where everybody burns stuff down. I don't want to do it where everybody rape and vape and all that. I'd rather have a little bit more grape and a little less vape and a little less rape. So, and plus a life affirming thing where you're not just destroying or coming in as some kind of venture capitalist who's making billions of dollars and then complaining about the music. I don't like that whole scenario. So we're trying to offer an alternative. So that's why we're out in places that look like a log cabin.
Well, it's lovely. I wanted to get this out of the way because I know that a lot of people are concerned and wondering what happened. So I just want to let kind of clear the air and let people know that producer Jessica is not on the show right now. So we don't have a moderator, George. So we're gonna have to do a couple of things. One is that we're gonna have to keep an eye on the chat ourselves, and so if anybody sees something untoward going on, let us know, and we'll try to take care of it. And then the second thing is our audio levels okay? So let us know about that stuff. But just to clear the air, producer Jessica became very ill on March 1st, and it was something. George, and it was something that kind of caught us all by surprise. She's been in the hospital most of March. It looks like there's a good chance that she's going to get out of the hospital tomorrow. And I don't want to go into why she's in the hospital or what's going on with her. That's completely, her business, and I don't feel comfortable sharing that on the internet. But she doesn't have cancer. It isn't a terminal disease, but it did require immediate attention. And so that's been my life for the last month, is just managing that. And so that's what's going on with me. So nobody's got cancer. We don't have 9-centimeter tumors or anything like that. But it was all life encompassing, the entire adventure. So hopefully it's over tomorrow. So there we go.
Well, obviously our thoughts and prayers are with you, and I was out there with you for a good portion of that, and I could just tell you it was life consuming, and so it we're all looking for a good resolution. So, yeah, and Peter, all the things that have happened, March was one of the most eventful months, news-wise. But sometimes, like just take the bridge thing, with the hitting the bridge. It just brings up all these old stories, that we were talking about. Nancy Pelosi and Nancy Pelosi's dad in the Port of Baltimore, the OSS, the CIA port. If you ever wanted to choke off Washington, if Trump won the election and you want to choke off Washington so the electors couldn't get to Washington, I think that's the idea of today is we need a bigger moat graphic. It's all right there. And we all did this 7-8 years ago. So it just has brought up a lot of stories we worked on for the 40 or 50 times we went to the Port of Baltimore. And then also, remember Lincoln, you didn't have Lincoln in the, yeah, there you go. That's a great graphic. Nancy Pelosi's. Go ahead.
No, that's it. I was just going to show up. I think I have a few here. I didn't get a chance to post them to the members of the Duke Report, but I will after the show. I'll post all the different art that we created today.
But you get the idea. It's a moat, and Lincoln did the same thing in habeas corpus in 1862, where they actually moved the legislature and the Capitol from Columbia to Annapolis, a southern more federal, more union positive capital. And that could very easily happen again. You could very easily move Washington to the State House in Annapolis. We talked about it when we were doing shows 7-8 years ago. I think our first meeting was...
Is that a COG contingency?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And you have the State House there. You have the various other things. Much easier to defend and wall off because you have water on 180 degrees.
Right.
So, and that was our first charrette, if you remember. And then you got the Russian retreat right there. So you can create as many Russian false narratives as you want. And you have Gibson Island right there with nuclear power. And so it really is, always has been, ever since Lincoln, a fallback position. I'm not saying that's Pelosi's plan. You could cut off the Potomac to the south at Alexandria to do the same thing. It's just a little easier if you go to Annapolis.
Yeah, maybe I should pull up Google Earth and we can take a look at it. Yeah, I mean, Richard Grove. I do think that Richard Grove, if you want a kind of a recap on the news of the week, his 6 to 8 hour podcast that he does every Sunday night is really good, and he covered the bridge disaster from about 6 different points of view, and it was great because Tony is very good at doing picking out the logical fallacies. But one of the things that I've noticed that I'm getting pretty good at is picking out the linguistic fallacies. And just to kind of remind people what that means is that there's a common linguistic pattern that newscasters and politicians use, which is a cause-effect statement that is connected to a complex equivalence. And the example that I might give is that if you get the vaccination, then you will be protected from the disease and you won't pass it on to other people. So the cause effect is if you get the vaccination, and then the complex equivalence is the rest of it. It turns out that there are 14 different ways that you can debunk that kind of logic. And the reason that I like looking at that instead of going and memorizing all the logical fallacies is it turns out that there, I think, are at least 10 logical fallacies that fit under that linguistic rubric. So instead of remembering 10 different logical fallacies, you can just remember one linguistic pattern. And so I like that. And so Richard Grove and Tony went through and they took a look at, Redacted and a few other news sources where people were kind of making these kind of wild prognostications about what actually happened in Baltimore. And we know a ship hit a bridge. That's what we know. And we also know that bridge going down and blocking the channel there is going to keep that harbor from operating. Exactly. Sorry. Excuse me. We know that it's going to keep that harbor from operating for the near future, at least a year. And it's an election year, and Baltimore is right next to Washington, D.C. And so one of the things that George and I were talking about in preparing for the show today is that the thing that we know for sure is cui bono. The thing that we know for sure is who will benefit from the people who will rebuild the bridge will benefit, right? The people who are going to collect insurance or maybe shorting stocks on any business that might get disrupted by the bridge going down, they're going to benefit. We know that there will probably be unemployment. A lot of those Teamsters and longshoremen who are in charge of moving all of those goods on and off of those ships in the Port of Baltimore, they're out of work right now. And they're out of work right before the summer, before an election. And we know that Baltimore has had some serious violence in the last 10 years. And wouldn't this just exacerbate that? So instead of diving into the wild prognostications, I mean, the joke that I made was that if the ship is hacked, the person who's going to pop up and tell everybody that it was a hack is probably going to be Dmitry Alperovitch at CrowdStrike, because nobody would know more about hacking a ship than Dmitry Alperovitch. And George has domain experience with that. So I'm not predicting that Dmitry Alperovitch is going to say something, but if you see a press release from CrowdStrike or Dmitry Alperovitch or the Atlantic Council or anybody like that in the next 8 to 10 days, then that's good metadata. You can put that metadata together with what we're talking about right now. What do you think, George?
Yeah, well, they're already saying ISIS-K, a general named McKinsey saying ISIS-K is going to start. We didn't even know about ISIS-K until a month ago, right? This is the latest version of ISIS that they're going to throw at us. The immediate beneficiary and the people go means, motive, and opportunity, right? The beneficiary, at least $100 billion with NATO. If Trump doesn't win the election, it's at least $100 billion, more like $1 trillion. Right. So, and then means explosives, intelligence operatives, etc., bridge experts, you name it. NATO's got them. Motive, absolutely, to keep Trump out of office, no question. And opportunity, yeah. They've been working with Nancy Pelosi hand in glove for her whole career, and Adam Schiff. And the two, you mentioned the hack of the DNC. Now they've changed what they call Article 5, which is the communal defense or the community defense. An attack on one is an attack on all. They've changed that from an attack, like a tank invasion, to a cyber attack, to bioagents, to a DNC pipe bomb. Anything can trigger NATO Article 5. And that's hundreds of billions of dollars in an election season. And this did happen right before coronavirus. This happened in NATO headquarters, Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi, in February 19th of 2020. And we have actually Susie Davis, a congresswoman from San Diego, saying they invoked Article 5. Now, supposedly the reason, right, that they invoked Article 5, there's Baltimore Harbor.
Right. Yeah. Somebody was saying you don't need the bridge to open up the harbor, but the bridge is collapsed into the channel. So all of this stuff has to be cleared. There's thousands of tons of steel that are laying in this channel right now. So
right. And my point being is that means, motive, and opportunity. I don't care what the conspiracy theory is. Show me somebody who has effectuated their conspiracy theory. Show me Adam Schiff. Show me Nancy Pelosi in NATO headquarters in Moat, Belgium, and invoking Article 5 in February of 2020. Show me someone who has that capability, right? That's a very small group of people. And this is Nancy Pelosi's harbor. Her brother's involved in it. Her father was involved in it before her with the OSS and the CIA, Bill Barr, Donald Barr was involved down there as well. We went and did our first charrette down there. This is Pelosi's harbor. We said this is CIA harbor. We said this goes back to all the way back to the Hollabird and various landings there, all the way back to Bay of Pigs. This may go all the way back to Perm Index with her father, being used with the Gladio operations in Italy, going all the way back to James Angleton when he played the role of being an Italian anarchist. So there's so much history here. And again, the reason they supposedly invoked Article 5, which is only one other time has been invoked, which is 9/11, was supposedly the reason given in February 2020. The reason given was women's rights in Afghanistan. That's a war that had been going on 30 years. But that was the time, February 2020, right before the live exercise with the State Department coronavirus. That was the time to invoke NATO Article 5.
And did you post that in your Substack?
Yes,
quote?
it's posted in the Twitter. You'll see the pinned tweet is the video of them. Yeah, here we go.
Here we go. All right.
My point is they invoked Article 5 on Trump, not on for women's rights, so that they could make hand beads for some women's group in Afghanistan.
All right, here we go. Let's try this.
These people carried the Imran Awan encrypted black.
Start again.
Okay, this is the most amazing discovery of the triggering of NATO Article 5 by Adam Schiff, by Jackie Spear, by Nancy Pelosi, by Greg Meeks. All these people were BlackBerry carriers. All these people carried the Imran Awan encrypted BlackBerries. They're the same people after the attempted impeachment of Trump now go to NATO and use NATO intelligence to try to take down Trump. It really happened. It's called the Parliamentary Assembly. The Parliamentary Assembly for NATO. Here they all are. They're going into NATO headquarters to effect this coup. It's happening right here. Out of their own mouths, they say they do trigger NATO Article 5.
And the power of the purse, of course, always important, as the speaker said. So I think we're here to reaffirm and remind our colleagues at a time where maybe some doubts have been planted to clear those doubts up.
I just may conclude by saying, when you asked, were we giving the advice, that we came here to listen. And yesterday, when we started our meeting with the president of the EU, he said, "I'm here to listen." I said, "Well, we're here to listen. This could be a very silent meeting." However, it wasn't. And it went on for an hour and a half of our learning from each other. And that's what this is about.
Klaus came in and told everybody what to do.
Respect. It's about not only how we discuss our differences, but how we do so in a manner that recognizes the importance of all parties to the discussion.
Hello, everyone. I'm Susan Davis. I'm from San Diego, California, and I am a proud member of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly and also a rapporteur for the Science and Technology Committee. And that's one of the things that NATO cares about. We triggered Article 5. We triggered Article 5. Triggered Article 5. We are together on that, and we appreciate the fact that our NATO colleagues and countries are with us.
And here's a little explanatory note on what Article 5 is. Basically, you go through a grievance process if your nation has been attacked. That's called Article 4. That leads to Article 5 declaration, which is, hey, an attack on one is an attack on all. So you get everybody. If you attack Lower Slobovia, you get now the United States coming in at you and all the other 31 different nations. Saying here that it only invoked Article 5 one other time during 9/11, and these other times that it lists here, 2012, 2014, and so forth, are Article 4 discussions, which led to military measures, but not full Article 5. So full Article 5 is a big deal. And now here's the telltale. They're expanding the definition of Article 5, the telltale to include coronavirus and bios. Here it comes. Here they introduce the doctor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the Speaker mentioned, I was an Army physician for a long time. It actually has assisted me in my congressional career. We recently had the coronavirus break out, and in my former life, I worked in the Army Institute of Research Institute of Infectious Diseases up at Fort Detrick. So it's very helpful to be able to call up my old pals and ask them some questions. I also want to say there's a complete 100% commitment on the part of America to remaining in NATO and making sure it remains strong. And I think that is, as the speaker said, a very bipartisan attitude.
And so
Good
I think,
catch, George.
yeah, I mean, I think it's just very simple. NATO wants to survive, and I wrote extensively in my Substack about the Washington NATO project, which is the kind of self-destruct time bomb for Washington if NATO's treaty is ever threatened. NATO's trying to put in, there it is, that's my Substack, and NATO's trying to put in $100 billion Trump-proof fund right now to show you that the money is on the table. This port, Baltimore, has run Operation Gladio since 1956. I think it goes back to 1952 with Tom DeSangelo, the father of Nancy Pelosi. It's got a long history for providing covert weapons. If you play this, Peter, you'll hear her a year later after declaring
Article 5.
Yeah, and here's what she says.
In fact, when people ask me, if you rule the world, what one thing would you do? I think about that a lot.
I bet you do.
In fact, when people ask me, if you rule the world, what one thing would you do? I think about that a lot. In fact, when people ask me, if you rule the world, what one thing would you do? I think about that a lot.
Unbelievable.
And she goes, rah, 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 and that I think she's saying, rah, 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 kill Donald Trump. And some people say she sounds like she's apologizing. I don't think she's apologizing.
All right, well, let's hear it again. Let's hear it again.
In fact, when people ask me, if you rule the world, what one thing would you do? I think about that a lot. In fact, when people ask me, if you rule the world, what one thing would you do? I think about that a lot. In fact, when people ask me, if you rule the world.
Sorry, George, I was distracted by this troll we have. I have to figure out how to get rid of Burr Cold. He's saying, sorry, you Russian disinfo trolls don't like NATO. Tough titty-tas. I'm going to put him into the weak signature reduction list that I have going.
I'll check that and just say there's nobody who my family has had a long history of fighting for the United States government, and I have family members that put in huge encryption projects for NATO so that NATO could not be intercepted by Russians. So quite the opposite. My family's history in terms of ensuring the secrecy of NATO's operations is right up there at the top. Nothing to do with me, but everything to do with family members. Fantastic service record toward NATO. Sure. What we don't want to see, though, is using NATO to take out political opponents just because you can. That's what we don't want to see, where you're invoking Article 5 at the drop of a hat. You're throwing a pipe bomb, a fake pipe bomb over at the DNC headquarters, and now you're going to invoke continuity of government. You get used to doing this. You have Dmitry Alperovich hack in and say he hacked into the server. Now I have continuity of government. Now I have Article 5 money. This is the hundreds of billions of dollars being released right during an election campaign. That's what we're against.
Yeah, I have to stop being distracted by this idiot who's on Twitter. I don't actually know how to get rid of him. So,
well, actually, sometimes the trolls are an amazing metadata release of actually who's trying to stop you. Mine are like Five Eyes. Mine is like the Five Eyes Hall of Fame. They're all make several $1 million. Some are in the $1 billion category, right? In terms of the U.S. trolls, $1 billion category. MQ-9 Reapers, General Atomics. They stand to benefit the most from covert action. They don't want overt military action. They want covert action where they're spraying with the MQ-9 Reaper. This James Jameson. So you got PhDs from Oxford, England, that have shadowed me for 8 years. Why? Got a person from NSA with 8 different relatives that work for NSA and DARPA shadowing me for 8 years. Why? You have to ask yourself, you must be doing something right. You notice how they're not bothering James O'Keefe today, right? They're not bothering Alex Jones today. They're not bothering Steve Bannon today because they're no threat. This is
They don't ever bother the redacted people. They don't.
Scott Pelley. Who did Scott Pelley come at? January 4th, 2 days before January 6th. Comes after our research group, not Alex Jones. No offense to Alex, but he comes after us because we're going to be there. We're the ones saying, hey, it's going to be Proud Boys. Proud Boys are going to try to throw it on to Joe Biggs, especially. They're going to try to throw it on Trump and say these are Trump people, right? That's why they take us out on January 4th. I expect trolls to be here saying all kinds of lies because that shows you we're doing the right thing.
Yeah. It's I guess it's we knew the job was dangerous when we took it.
If you just click on the name, by the way,
yeah,
and you right click, you can block or time out.
The problem is here's the idiot. I'll put him up here. I don't know how many R's are there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is it 6? But because of the way that StreamYard works, I have to go find it in Twitter, and I don't know where it is. And this is the kind of thing that Jessica would normally do. So,
well, the good news here is he's nailed the person who actually did the X509 mini certs and did the credit cards for NATO folks that were overseas. He did it in Luxembourg. He's done work at the DoD in many different departments. Right? If he thinks I'm a traitor, that's fine. I think it's easy to come in here and say that. I haven't talked to him in 5 years, right? I'm just saying that this shows you how wrong this person is about our family's service to NATO. It's exactly the opposite.
Sure.
I would put our family's service to NATO and to the American Armed Forces above anyone in Congress. Anyone in Congress, right? Our service in terms of not just in terms of willing to die for the country and also for the state of Israel, right? I'd put my family and my kids, putting them up for service in Israel against anyone in Congress.
Would you still do that, George?
Yeah, they wouldn't agree to it because they're on.
Would
for me to offer the lives of my kids, you know? Yeah. But I'm just saying, think about that. No one has done more for the country in any of the elected government, right, than our family has done for NATO, right? That's the people you want out there on the wall.
He's saying deny you work for Russia. If I was working for Russia, I wouldn't live in a 460 square foot apartment. Okay.
I wouldn't be working at a youth camp, right? I wouldn't be working for Habitat for Humanity. I wouldn't be working for Goodwill. I wouldn't be working for this youth ranch. I wouldn't be working for volunteer organizations moving furniture so that people can have a place to live if I was working for Russia, right?
Right. Yeah. It's just laughable, you know. Yeah. He said it takes Jessica 5 seconds to block me. It takes 1 minute to create a new account. Okay.
Well, in that sense, yeah, I wouldn't let it get to you too much because I can't see it.
I'm not. It's a distraction and it's annoying. And it makes me, frankly, want to like just turn off live chat altogether. But
I think people realize that there's always going to be Five Eyes and there's always going to be signal reduction. It's a part of what we do, right? Sure. And like I say, 8 relatives with the NSA, 8 relatives. Father worked for DARPA. Right, not just down the street from you, Peter. Right, hooking up DARPA, the original ARPA network.
Right,
downtown Santa Monica. He worked up in Santa Barbara.
The Marina Towers is the DNS-1. I think it's still in Marina Towers on Lincoln. And
they moved it. And they moved it to Washington D.C. and then they brought it into DARPA, and that's how the internet's being used against every person. In every man, woman, and child in America. That's that person's background.
Right.
That's that person's background, where it's really stabbed every person in the world, man, woman, and child, in the back.
Sure.
Because the internet was supposed to be free. It was supposed to be this place, a learning man, a life-affirming place. They turned it around into a backstabbing art.
Sure.
And by trolling, they prove every day that their father was the person who brought the backstabbing to the internet.
Yeah, and as we've talked about on this show many times, like if you've ever read any, if you've read Quigley and Sutton, if you've read Guido Preparata, then you know what NATO really is, and you know what's really going on, and you understand the dynamic between the United States, Great Britain, and who's calling me now? The hospital. Here, can you take this for 1 second, George?
Sure. Well, welcome to the Duke Report. I'm your guest host, George Webb, and you are also being visited by trolls from all over the world. We love them because they represent MI6, Australian intelligence, New Zealand intelligence, the NSA, DARPA, and so forth. Remember what we said in March 2020, right? Remember, we're talking to Donnie O'Sullivan live, and we're saying there's 3 of these Banassis, right, that have an odd connection to the highest levels of NATO intelligence. They seem to, the Italian intelligence, Pietro Banassi, Giuseppe Banassi running the NATO intelligence, and then we have Virginia Banassi receiving all the bids for something called DARPA Adept, right? That turned out to be mRNA. Those are the 3 Banassis we talked about. What did CNN want to talk about? Somebody who was a daughter-in-law, right? We talked about how NATO would be doing a live exercise against Donald Trump in March 2020. That was confirmed by Mike Pompeo live in a broadcast with Donald Trump on March 19th, where he said, we're in a live exercise, and Trump said, you should have told me. I believe the beginnings of that started on the day that Defender 2020 was supposed to start. Who ran Defender 2020? Giuseppe Banassi and Pietro Banassi, along with a guy from the U.S. National Security Council, who was Matt Pottinger's boss, a guy named Robert O'Brien. This was executed in February 2020. It was executed against Donald Trump. And that's what they were talking about. That's the thing they didn't tell Trump about, the coronavirus live exercise. And that's huge. That's huge. Nobody else has made that connection. No other research group has made that connection. We made it live with Donnie O'Sullivan. Now we have the receipts to prove it. Now we have the receipts to prove it, that they did invoke Article 5 for this live exercise.
So has there been any ability to get another source on that disclosure? Because
we went to the NATO-PA, which is Parliamentary Assembly.
Yeah.
They've removed a lot of their stuff, but we've taken screenshots. A lot of the screenshots are on the, you see her video of Susan Davis saying they invoked Article 5.
Right.
But we've taken a lot of the screenshots so they can't erase it. And we've taken a lot of the actual transcripts so they can't erase it. Peter, there are the 7 times in our history, right, that Article 4 has been invoked. Article 4 is the precursor to Article 5.
Okay.
Right. September 11th was the only time before February 2020. Now, you have to believe, out of all those things, most of them involve Turkey and Syria. Right. And I do believe Lee Stranahan was right when he was in Syria. He was saying, hey, they're taking this stuff and they're going and they're going to overthrow Ukraine with all this war material. Right. That was a pretty genius move when I saw him in Syria. And he was the one who said that there's no theater restriction to Article 5. But you can see that even in those wars, they didn't even declare Article 5. They only declared Article 4, and they still had broad military powers. But you're trying to tell me so that in 2020, in February, protecting the rights of Afghani women to make hand art and hand jewelry and figure painting and all these other arts and crafts for women in Afghanistan, in a war that had already been going on 30 years. That's why you declared Article 5? That's their reason. If you play the whole Susan Davis thing, she talks about women's rights and the rights of families in Afghanistan after 30 years. Why didn't they think of it in the first 29 years?
Is this after we pulled out of Afghanistan?
No, we were just about ready to pull out of Afghanistan.
Okay.
When Biden becomes president, that's when they pull out of Afghanistan. But they declared, while Trump is president, spoons and forks and pot holders for Afghanistan. And Article 5 is declared supposedly to protect the rights of women in Afghanistan after 30 years into the conflict. Remember, there's 10 years in conflict with Osama bin Laden before you have a 20-year conflict, or actually 20 years of conflict, go back to all the way back to Operation Cyclone. So 40 years into it, now we're worried about potholders and women being able to make potholders in Afghanistan. I don't think that's the real reason we declared Article 5.
Yeah, and I'm also reminded of the creation of the CHAZ and the CHOP, which are things that all have UN implications that were never reported. Like they reported that these autonomous zones were created during the riots, but they never indicated what that actually meant. That it had a legal framework attached to it that was triggering certain things that could happen at the UN, or in your case, with NATO.
They did.
And those things just appear on the news, and they kind of normalize people to the idea that this thing got announced, but without any kind of explanation of what it means. Meaning that, you know, in the square block where George Floyd was killed, NATO could send troops in to secure the area if the people who lived there felt like the United States of America wasn't capable of protecting them anymore.
Yeah, and they took over the police stations, and this goes back to the Phoenix program in the 26 provinces of Vietnam. Doug Valentine wrote about it, but basically you take over a police or part of the police station and you cache weapons and you create interrogation centers and so forth, things that can be quickly turned over to command headquarters when you do Operation Gladio. You can either run covert operations where you cache weapons and explosives there for doing things like Port of Baltimore, or in an open warfare, you can start handing the guns out. Same thing for the CHAZ and the CHOP. Remember, George Floyd's brother appears in front of NATO, and they talk about the human rights, protecting human rights, and they talk about declaring an Article 5 or a continuation of Article 5. Because remember, I think Floyd happens in May 2020, right? So that may be the cover story that happens a few months later after they declare spoons and forks for Afghan women is the original reason. But they had to have a better reason than potholders and coffee cups for Afghan women. That was what they declared Article 5 for. And I believe George Floyd was a gun runner from Port. All of a sudden, I'm going to forget the port down in Texas. But he was running guns up to these various NATO locations, and he was bragging about it. He was printing fraudulent money, fake money, and he was being very ostentatious about it. And he knew Derek Chauvin for a number of years before they ever met there on that corner. And that was his handler. Derek Chauvin was his handler. So here's the thing, is like they're taking out their operation and then turning it into a raison d'etre for continuing Article 5.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
And it was Beaumont. And I went there. It's the largest cache of weapons for National Guards, because they don't want to have to move everything from the various National Guard armories to the Port of Baltimore before they ship out. And that's exactly where we found our good friend, our Pakistani intelligence officer, who's the largest contributor to Javid, the largest contributor to Hillary Clinton. You don't need to control the individual. You don't need to control the individual National Guard. You need to control the weapons of the National Guard.
Exactly. And that also, Modima Rose has a question, but that also reminds me of the arms stashes that were found in 2015 in the Pacific Palisades.
Everywhere you see a pipeline, you're going to see weapons, and that was Beck was her name, Lynn Beck, the second wife of Mr. Getty.
Right.
Yeah, Gordon Getty. Yeah.
Modima Rose says, what does an Article 5 afford us then? What does it do or mean?
It means I can bomb you. It means I can unleash a fleet of F-35s from all over the world against you in a multi-domain battle. It means I can drone you from a James Jameson MQ-9 Reaper. I can slow you down and start low-intensity warfare against you with various agents like anthrax or some combination of anthrax, superantigen, and a virus. It means I can conduct full, either high-intensity or low-intensity operations against you as an enemy of NATO. That's what it affords you dying. It affords you the ability to die for your country. There's nothing good about this. You might think, well, George Floyd was saved, or potentially in the future, George Floyd could be saved. Again, if you want to talk about somebody who had been very deep into drugs, very deep into gun running, very deep into pornography, that's the one person who may benefit, but not the people of the United States, the law-abiding people of the United States. No.
So, Scotia Wave says that Chauvin is in prison in Tucson. I think that Ross Ulbricht is in prison in Tucson too. I wonder if they hang out, if they play gin rummy.
Well, a lot of these things go too far, and I admit that he was trying to teach him a lesson so that he would stop talking and doing the chokehold, and he killed him, and so he should be in prison. Chauvin should be in prison. I'm not trying to say that there should be police brutality. Not at all. I think that police should use the justifiable force, but not more than justifiable force. Non-lethal force. There's a lot of different methodologies. So I'm not saying that the chokehold is good in any way at all. I am saying Chauvin went way too far, but you have to look into the facts. You can't just look into a side of a building that's been painted with a mural and then accept the whole woke, litany without looking into the facts.
Yeah, you also mentioned when you were, I don't know if it was in a film or in your story today, that we're approaching the 75th anniversary of NATO. And I know that that NATO was founded in the building that has this pediment, and their 50th anniversary was in this building, which is the Mellon Auditorium at the old Department of Interstate Commerce, which is now, I think, the EPA building in Washington, D.C. I shot this picture on January 5th, 2001. I mean, 2020. Whenever, the year that January 7th, January
6th was 2021, Jan 6, 2021, yeah.
Okay, I'm totally confused now. I'm confusing everything. But the reason that I bring this up is because on the pediment of a U.S. building is this hermaphroditic rendering of the patron goddess of the United States, Columbia. You can see quite clearly from the legs and the shoulders and the arms and the face that this is a very masculine figure that has boobs, and it is the only figure on the building that has a cloth draped over its private parts. And so it was a very astute friend of mine who pointed out as we were walking by that this is a hermaphroditic Baphomet rendering of the American patron goddess. Why we have a patron goddess, I don't know, of Columbia, and there's all kinds of esoteric thoughts about that. But this is the pediment of the building where NATO was created, where NATO was founded, where NATO had their 50th anniversary. And my guess is that if they're going to have a 75th anniversary, and my thought about this is that this is where the real secret government of the world has their meetings. This is where the decisions get made that wind up being fed over to the White House or fed over to the Congress. Or fed over to the Supreme Court and saying, this is the direction that we're going in, folks. And if you want to know why transgender ideology is so prolific at this point, you need to ask yourself the question, what was going on in 1930, I think, when this thing was commissioned, and in 1933 when it was installed on the building, because these are old ideas. These are not new, and they're right there carved into marble on the buildings of our federal government.
And this building isn't too far from the White House. And, the dark speech, when Joe Biden made the dark MAGA speech, his pronunciation was slightly wrong when he said the dark powers that control. It wasn't MAGA, it was mega. He meant to say mega. He meant to say Les
like
Wexner.
The mega group?
Yeah, like the mega group. He just had a little bit of a lisp or something. He missed it by one letter. Mega was the answer, would have been the right answer. He almost got it right on that dark speech, but I think the dark speech was here. Who can forget also Gavin Newsom's wife, Kimberly Guilfoyle, also making that speech like she was talking to 1 million people at a Hitler rally when she was actually talking to 3 people with a camcorder, made in that same place. And I'll on good authority, I have the beginnings of the CIA was discussed there by OSS stalwarts in that same building as well.
Right.
Before Langley.
Right. And it used to be just called something like the General Auditorium. It wasn't, it didn't have a name before, I think, the 1950s. Somebody can fact check me on that, but I think that it was named after Andrew Mellon. Again, he's a big time oligarch who has lots of references in, kind of the learned conspiracy people.
Harriman, all those railroad guys, right? All the skull and bonesers, right? They were like dominate the West, put a ribbon of steel between here and the gold in California. If we have to pick up some silver along the way in Nevada, we'll do it, right? We'll create a Southern Railway. This all American history leading up to 1900 kind of runs through these themes, right?
Right.
And it's the same people that create the CIA and the same people that were the backbone of the OSS.
Right. And here's a similar figure. This is in front of a place that you spent quite a bit of time at, the U.S. Archives. And this is a baby being held in a sheaf of wheat in one hand, and then an amphora on the other. And again, it's a quite masculine body, very masculine legs with a pair of boobs attached onto it. And then the kind of very masculine feet. And then the inscription here is, "The heritage of the past is the seed that brings forth the harvest of the future." And then it's got a globe, the planet Earth with wings on underneath it. So I'm not sure exactly what that means, but this is all very kind of, and you've got a bull on the left side here, and then it looks like a ram on the right. So this is all very kind of like esoteric and biblical stuff going on.
Well, I like to think of it as the embodiment of Burning Man, the hermaphroditic man. And what we want to do at Learning Man, Peter, is divide those two, make those two into one, make it into a beautiful feminine woman and a strong masculine man, right? Less vape, less rape, a little bit more grape. So we're doing our part to make these hermaphroditic tendencies go away in America.
So we're looking forward to doing that in August. Is that when you want to do that?
Well, I wanted to do it in some. My dad was in the CCCs. This has been a very rural week for me, doing a lot of volunteering. And my dad was, out there in the, chopping logs and making log cabins and things like that. And I want to do something like that, where it's sort of a back to nature week, where it's a think week, where you're reading books.
Sure.
Sort of like Hemingway's Two-Hearted River, where a river runs through it. You get back to nature a little bit and get away from spoiling nature and seeing how much trash you can put on nature and get into celebration of nature.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. I mean, one of the things that I've been doing a lot of research on lately is something that psychologists call body work. And it really means getting grounded in your physical existence, because so much of our life is spent kind of in this ethereal realm that we create in our own minds, and we have a tendency to spin ourselves up or spin ourselves out based on how we put words together in our heads. And you can fix a lot of that stuff by doing what you're talking about, by getting out and chopping wood or moving stuff around. I think that it is good for clearing the head.
Yeah, so maybe we could have something. I was trying to get something toward Elko and Reno and the existing place, but I decided, we don't need the deadheads. I love Jerry Garcia and all that, but we don't need the vapors. We need people who really want to do life affirming stuff. And I think more of the LA people, more of the Arizona people, more in the South, plus better weather. It's still quite cold in the north of Utah.
I got to tell you, every time I think about moving, I just look at the weather, and and I think I've said this before. I think that the reason that California has been chosen to do all of the social experiments that they've done. I mean, California had the first and the best public university in the world, and now that that's completely been destroyed by the next experiment, the social engineering that goes on in California, I believe that it goes on in California because you can normalize for weather. If you're trying to do social engineering in Chicago, you might get messed up every winter in moving things forward. Likewise, a hurricane in the south every once in a while is going to mess you up. In California, you get an earthquake maybe once every 25 years, maybe. Other than that, it's pretty chill here most of the time.
Well, that was the other reason for maybe someplace near Vegas, because it had a major airport, and then there's a lot of hotel rooms that are very, very inexpensive, and there are shrines to Peter Duke everywhere you look. There's some sort of esports, or there's something built.
I wouldn't call those shrines to Peter Duke, but I appreciate the nod.
But still, there are other things that you can do, the VR experiences and all those. I don't like them. I like the nature aspect of it. I like the chopping wood and the wood and the cabins and building decks and so forth. We keep getting knocked down with 9 centimeter tumors, with fast cancers everywhere we go. And so we're trying to be a little bit more coy about it. But I definitely would love to do a Palisades charrette sometime, because the Thomas Mann stuff and all.
Yeah, we need to go. Yeah, we need to find out whether or not you can actually just go do an event at the Chateau Aurora. What's it called? Or the it was one of those places where it's owned by the German government now, but it's called Via Aurora, VILLA. Via Aurora is walking distance from my house.
Because that's where the think tank of all this destruction of the masculine American male and all that, the communism and all that, and then also throw into the mix Berggruen.
Right.
You've talked a lot about Berggruen. Throw that in the mix. Throw Smirnoff and the Adam Schiff using these people to try to work operations against Republican large donors. That's a big thing going on now between Steve Garvey, the old Los Angeles Dodgers guy running for Senate, and one Adam Schiff. So there's a lot going on in LA. The Connect trial is going on this week, which is exfiltrating all of our genomes to China. Eddie Eds has a new book out about that. With this virtual voice, Peter, it's kind of like an 11 Labs, but it's virtual voice. It's Amazon's virtual voice. So there's a lot going on in LA.
Yeah, somebody asked me to sign up for a voice print service the other day where I don't have to put my password in. I just have to talk and it does a voice print. And I thought, well, that's the next thing. And then they can use that to clone my voice.
And then
they can frame me for something. So there it is.
Yeah, well, AI is difficult. That's why if you're not there, I hate to say it, but if you're not there on the wall, if you're not there on that gate, filming Joe Biggie's going over gate 1 and gate 2 and saying it's Proud Boys that did it, not Donald Trump, you're going to get the AI. You're going to get their interpretation 3 years later, drips and drabs, breadcrumbs, saying it's Trump, it's Trump, it's Trump. You're going to get a Trump hater like Steve Baker from Blaze TV, CRTV, which is Gavin McGinnis, Proud Boys TV, right? You're going to get somebody saying Trump did it, Trump did it, Trump did it. That's why you have to have citizen journalists. That's why it has to be live, because they can AI it later. So that's just my opinion.
Well, yeah, but not only that, like the bigger the organization that you belong to, the more likely that you're gonna wind up getting the short shrift like Candace Owen did at the Daily Wire. You know, I don't know if you followed that at all, but you know,
yeah,
she said that Gaza is a genocide, and Jeremy and Ben said you can't say that, so she's gone.
You know, Lee Stranahan was outside of the, who you and I both know, was outside of the White House dinner. Going to the White House dinner, I got two witnesses, Cassandra Fairbanks and another person, saw him get hit with the first stroke he ever had. And he was going to go in and tell the story of Ukraine Gate. He's going to say, hey, the Syria thing is the bait and switch. They're getting the money for Syria, but they don't really want to win. They want to flip Ukraine. And he had people to prove that, and no theater specific limitation of Article 5. And it wasn't even Article 5 at that point, it was just Article 4. So all these Article 4s connect back to NATO. All these things like Syria, Libya, Sudan, Yemen, the overthrow in Ukraine, all link back to this server in the Senate Sergeant of Arms, the OSCE NATO server that's sitting in the Senate Sergeant of Arms. Right? Every time there's a flip, they're all carrying the same Blackberries. All those Blackberry carriers, Peter, that we talked about, Jackie Spear, Greg Meeks, Adam Schiff, one Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, they're all there.
Right.
They're all there invoking Article 5 for better potholders for women in Afghanistan after 30 years of war.
Yeah, it's incredulous. And the New York Times was right there to question them about it, right? The Washington Post, NPR,
completely hidden, and they've removed it from their website to show you how ashamed they are of their actions. So yeah, I'm a big communist payee out here in the middle of Wendover, you know.
Right. Yeah. It's
Nevada.
and we're so effective. You know, we've got 218 people on one channel, and I don't know how many we have on the other, and it's interesting that these signature reduction people are coming after us, because it's like, is there actually really a budget for that, or are these people just true believers that have psyched themselves into some kind of insanity?
Unlimited budget. You don't. It's all in the family. 8 different family members in NSA. Dad with DARPA, right? It's an unlimited fountain.
Right.
All you have to do is say something horrible once a week, and you get the cash. What a great job! $10,000 a month.
Right. You just have to put your garbage up and then screenshot it, and then you send the screenshots in. You get $10 for every screenshot that you send in.
Way more.
Yeah.
$10K a month for the active signature reduction NSA. $10K a month.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I was talking to a buddy who was in Afghanistan. He joined up after 9/11 and was sent over to Afghanistan to guard opium poppy fields. And he said after they set up their perimeter, they flew in Chinese nationals to run the opium fields in Afghanistan. So U.S. military guarding opium fields that are being cultivated by Chinese nationals. And were they Uyghurs? I don't know.
Hmong. And they've moved to Hmong ever since, follow all history, right? China revolution, the Hmong moved to Thailand. Then they move them to Laos, then they move them to Cambodia, and then they move them to Vietnam. So it's always about the drugs, yeah.
Right, and then he said his second duty after guarding poppy fields in Afghanistan was to guard pallets of $100 bills that were being delivered to warlords in Afghanistan. And I was trying to, I asked him how many there were, and maybe somebody who's listening can help me figure this out. But like, how many. I asked him how high they were because we know how big pallets are. Pallets are a standard size, right? But I wanted to know how high they were, and he said that there were like 16-inch pallets, and like there were, and then he said there were like he said 40 inches, and I said 39 because that's a meter, you know. So there were like 18-inch pallets, and then there were 1 meter pallets, and he said that there also were pallets of 50s and 20s that they were doing, but lots of $100 pallets that they were moving around Afghanistan.
Those are for the Hamong runners. Those are for the Lev Parnasses, the money runners.
Mm-hmm.
But the chieftains getting $100 bills. I've interviewed many folks that were in Afghanistan that said that the bag of money, they throw all the money into a like a trash bag, so it wouldn't be obvious, and then they would go in there. It's the first meeting with a warlord, sit down with a bag of money. That was the opener. The
Right,
Marine colonel, or the intelligence officer, bag of money. That was the game opener.
Yep. So I'm trying to remember why I actually started telling this story. It had something to do with.
Because I think Article 5 for Afghanistan maybe to make sure the elites are running the opium business well.
Sure.
Going all the way back to Nancy Pelosi again.
Well, because didn't the Taliban shut that down as soon as they took over again?
Yep. And then we immediately attacked the Taliban. Dan Hopsinger told me something very interesting. He said most of the drug business, and he's spent his whole life researching it, is run by elites in those respective countries.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't agree on having drugs in your country, you die. And then they find somebody who doesn't have a problem. It's the old British East India Company. They find somebody who doesn't have a problem with it and doesn't mind sharing.
Sure.
And as long as you're willing to share, and as long as you're willing to take some of the money and put it toward weapons, to put whatever government in, and share the oil and share the gas and share the rare earth metals and share the precious metals, everything's fine. The problem comes when you stop sharing, or you stop the drug business, and then you have a problem.
Yeah, it's all crazy. So let me see if there's any actual legit questions here. There are some trolls. Just there's another troll doing something stupid. Let me see. Hunter Gatherer says the USA. Oh, this is okay. So I'm missing this. One of the things that Jessica would do is that she would take the comments from Rumble and she would put them into StreamYard so that I could share them on the screen. That's not happening today. I'll have to figure that out. I was playing around. Rumble has their own version of StreamYard. That would allow us to put comments on, but it doesn't have all the same features that StreamYard has. And so I think that there's some kind of a battle between Rumble and StreamYard, because it would be ideal if I could just moderate all the comments on StreamYard.
There's 3 little buttons to the right of every comment, and you can hit that button, and then one of the buttons is show, and that's when it'll flip the comment up. But Rumble, StreamYard also has something called StreamYard Air now, which is a Zoom capability. So it's a private capability, and you send out an email invitation, and then it's only invited guests, which is kind of neat, because we may want to go to a paid format as we go forward, public format, and then have a separate show that's
yeah, I mean, that seems to be the business model a lot of people do. What's his name? Viva Fry. He does a 2-hour show, and the first hour is on every channel, and then he turns every channel off except Rumble for the second hour. So if you want to keep watching, you just go to Rumble.
And that's just because we have to pay the bills,
Sure. Yeah.
It's just like, it's not, living in a cabin with no heat, right, is not living it up. It's not living at the Ritz, right, and working for Goodwill, right? I mean, so you're not living it up, but you do need to eat, right? So that's the key.
Indeed. So let me see if there's any questions that I could see. Yeah, Hooter 1964 said, "Who would have thought that Lady Justice was not only blind but also had a penis?" That wasn't Lady Justice. That's Columbia. Although Lady Justice, I do have a picture of Lady. There's actually, she's not called Lady Justice. There's in front of the Supreme Court is another goddess, but she's holding justice on her knee. I think I have that. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, I think I do. Here we go. Lady Justice. Now, if this doesn't look like it's out of a Ridley Scott movie, I don't know what does. Here we go. Share screen window. All right, so this is the Supreme Court of the United States of America. This may be one of the best pictures I've taken. I actually really like this picture a lot. I might make a big print of it, but you can see here that this goddess, and I can't remember what the name of this goddess is she's holding justice. You can see she's blindfolded in her hand. Okay, so there is a goddess who holds justice in her hand, and that's in front of the Supreme Court. So that's kind of a weird one too.
Alexandra Pelosi, maybe with Proud Boys TV, maybe is holding justice.
And they all seem to have their right foot on this footstool, and I'm not exactly sure what that indicates. You can also see that the seat that she's on right here is made of fasci, and fasci, of course, are the official symbol of fascism. So the United States government buildings are covered with fasci. They're all over the place, and the idea of fasci is that hang on a second. I'm trying to figure out a way to make this smaller now. The idea of fasci is that a bundle of sticks is stronger than any of the individual sticks, and the columns themselves kind of look like fasci themselves, but there's that. Okay, remove. I'm going to go back and see if there's any other comments, and I'll have to figure out how to get this done. If anybody's interested in being a mod, send me an email at peter@thedukereport.com, but don't do it if you want to hide behind some fake name and you don't want to have a telephone conversation, because I'm going to vet whoever does that. Let me see. Block the trolls, not the guys that question things, guys. That's not fair. I thought that's why we are here. Yeah, you are here to question. We don't mind questions. Somebody, Hooters 1964 said, Peter, who ordered the figures to be put on these buildings? These are all good questions for researchers to go find out. What I'd like to know is who wrote the creative brief for the pediment of what became the General Auditorium and then was later renamed the Mellon Auditorium at the Interstate Commerce Commission building, because that's when it was built, it was the Interstate Commerce Commission building. My guess is that there was something called a request for proposal, an RFP, that was put out by the government when they determined that they were going to build that building and that they needed to create those sculptures. I can tell you from working on the Las Vegas Springs Preserve, which was a Harry Reid pork barrel project in Las Vegas that I worked on from 2005 to 2007, that all of the notes on the details of what they call the call-outs of what the figures are going to be were on all of the blueprints for the Las Vegas Springs Preserve. So my guess is that if you can find the blueprints for the Interstate Commerce Commission building, included with the blueprints would be the creative brief, which might actually just be written into the margins of the blueprints of what they call the call-outs for the determination of those figures. And it would be interesting to, go investigate the sculptor and find out, who he was friends with and who brought him in and who hired him and how he got that job and, all those other questions. My guess is they're probably in the National Archives someplace.
My impression was that was one of the later developed parts of Washington, a swampier part of Washington.
Yeah.
And
the triangle, they called
it.
The
Federal Triangle is what it was called. And if you go there today, it'll say "Make no little plans." Was the watchword of the, make great buildings, and State Department. Commerce was over there, and FDA, and all the other, But there was a lot of federal buildings. Reagan Building supposedly has more concrete than the Pentagon was created over there too. So I that's the impression I get. It was part of the Federal Triangle complex, and there was a whole bunch of buildings built with that.
Yeah, I mean, there's other. I could probably show you the reason that my friend pointed it out that it was a hermaphrodite was that he pointed to two other buildings, which I will show you right now, which flank the old Interstate Commerce Commission building. And I have one here, and then I have one here, and let me open them with this app, and then I can share it. So on one building, there's Hermes. Wait, got to click here. Okay, so on one side of that pediment is Hermes. Again, this is the United States federal government. I'm not exactly sure what Hermes has to do with the United States federal government, except Hermes is on one side of that pediment. And then on the other side of the pediment is Aphrodite. Okay, so what do you get when you add Hermes to Aphrodite, George?
I would say bend over.
You get hermaphrodite, George.
Hermaphrodite. Oh, right.
Okay.
Right.
So this is how my friend pointed out to me how he proved that the Columbia was a hermaphrodite. He said, there's Hermes over there, there's Aphrodite over there, and in the middle is hermaphrodite.
Well, they say Allen Dulles with Sullivan and Cromwell created the SEC, and supposedly S&C, which was the original Skull and Bones. Basically, all that was created by these Yale guys who felt like there needed to destroy something, which was the rural-based economy and the state-based economy, and they needed to create a federal overlord or overstructure. So SEC was created right around then. Federal Reserve was already in 1913, but all the other basically control agencies in Washington that are in the Federal Triangle are in 1933 vintage.
Right.
And they all got co-opted. They were all supposed to be to ensure the little guy didn't get cheated. They all were then immediately turned around and used against the little guy. The CIA co-opted all of them. Before that, Army Intelligence co-opted all of them. And they're still, I think, celebrating it to this day. It'd be interesting to see when the freezes were done, because I think the freezes probably happened during the World War II era, but we'll see.
No. I think they were all put up. I think that I researched it. I think that they were contracted in 1930 and they were put up in 1933, which is, of course, when FDR came into office. So.
Yeah, it could be taking out Harding, and not Harding, excuse me, Hoover. But there was talk of a coup, if you remember the business plot. It was called
sure.
that Allen Dulles ran. They very much felt like Wall Street should be the controller of Washington.
Sure.
And I think that's the overarching theme of these things: is the messenger is not from Washington. The messenger is from New York.
Right. And you had mentioned drugs earlier, and Skull and Bones, and Skull and Bones was famously kind of funded by the Russell Trust. And I think that the Russell Trust, all that money came from opium.
Brookings Institute, by the way, I'm told by the great Andy.
You broke up there, George.
And hopefully Andy's heart's okay out there. I hope Andy DeBala is okay. He's watching from Texas, but he tells me that there was a big Brookings Institute study about five by the Brookings Institute, a think tank, called Trump's Article 5 problem. And it probably refers to the fact if you're trying to get rid of NATO, you could always invoke Article 5 against the president to stop him from doing that. It's a self-preservation thing. Hey, you're trying to say that NATO is a Cold War artifact that has no use since 1930, for the last 35 years since the ending of the Soviet Union. Well, that's a direct threat. That's a Article 5 threat to the existence of NATO, and we need to now invoke Article 5 against you, Trump. And that's what happened, actually, not guessing. That's what came out of their mouth February 2022.
There it is.
February 2020.
Actually, this says May 2017.
Yeah, this is even before then. This is the predictor. Hey, we're going to use this on Trump.
Very interesting. Anyway, well, George, it's good to be back in the saddle. If people want to, should we wrap this up?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. People want to send me a stick of, a flintlock so that I can start a fire with my gathered firewood. I'd be more appreciative as all get out.
All right. Very good. If you want to support George Webb, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/George Webb, no E, number 1, and you can buy George a coffee. Or you can go to georgewebb.substack.com and you can subscribe to George's Substack, where you'll get all the inside dope on what's really going on. George does the metadata analysis on the news. And if you want to support this channel, and I sincerely want to thank everybody who's hung in there with me during the month of March, because it was tough, and I felt bad that I couldn't provide you guys with more content. But it was just one of those things where it was out of my control and I couldn't do anything about it. So to that end, thank you. I want to thank everybody who continues to support this channel. And if you go to buymeacoffee.com/The Duke Report, you can do that. You can go to thedukereport.com and you can click on the Buy Me a Coffee button, or you can click on the shop and you can buy yourself an edgy t-shirt. My current favorite t-shirt is the Dead Voter Society t-shirt, which I should be wearing right now, but hadn't thought of it yet. And other than that, I will see you again next Tuesday, George. And I may be doing some things between now and Tuesday. I'm still kind of getting organized right now. I kind of feel like I've had my right arm removed, and so I need to figure out a way to get a new one. And with that, I will see you next Tuesday, George.
Okay. See you then, Peter. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And trolls, this is for you.